1 second. Right, I believe we have some footage that has been taken on a mobile phone. Let's have a look at it.
Look.
Drone footage showed change, where change shouldn't occur. An ancient stone structure in Ireland. Routine monitoring flight. The stone element, heavy, door-like, carefully positioned, no longer aligned the way it had before. The difference was measurable. Confirmed across multiple surveys, the timestamps were clear. The flight paths matched, camera settings identical. No people appeared in frame, no equipment, no visible force applied to the stone. What the footage captured was not dramatic. No moment of motion, no collapse or shift caught mid-frame, just a before and an after. The stone occupied a different position than it had months earlier. Stone structures don't move on their own, not without force, not without witnesses. They're governed by gravity, friction, centuries of stillness. Yet something changed. If nothing touched it, nothing should have moved. Ancient stone structures are supposed to be stable, governed by well-understood physical principles: gravity, friction, careful balance. Once set, they endure. In Ireland, such structures have been studied extensively. Megalithic tombs from the Neolithic period were designed to last. Massive stones set into prepared sockets, weight distributed evenly across bedrock. Medieval stone chambers followed similar logic, refined through centuries of building practice. In both cases, structural change is assumed to occur slowly, if at all. When movement does happen, it follows predictable patterns: erosion, gradual subsidence, the slow sinking or settling of ground beneath weight, collapse, following significant disturbance. These processes leave traces: cracks in stone, displaced debris, disturbed sediment. Conservation protocols reflect this understanding. Sites are monitored for visible stress, leaning stones, water infiltration, biological growth eating into mortar. Small shifts can occur due to freeze-thaw cycles, where ice expands in cracks and slowly forces stone apart. Soil compaction can lower foundations incrementally. Tree roots can push elements out of alignment over decades, but these changes are incremental. They accumulate visibly. They announce themselves through cracking, tilting, or separation that inspectors can document and measure. When movement is suspected, the explanation is usually environmental. Strong winds dislodge loose material. Heavy rainfall undermines foundations. Temperature fluctuations stress stone over long periods. In rare cases, animal activity, burrowing, trampling, or unauthorized human interference may alter a structure. Each of these mechanisms is documented, modeled, expected to leave evidence. Drone monitoring fits comfortably within this framework. Drones provide aerial perspective for verification. They confirm that nothing has changed, that preservation measures are working, that the site remains as it was. The assumption underlying their use is continuity, stability as the default state. Within this model, stone features do not reposition themselves. If a stone appears to move, the expectation is misinterpretation, measurement error, or an overlooked external force. The system as understood is closed and sufficient. The fracture appeared not as a dramatic event, but as a discrepancy between records. The drone program followed consistent protocol, repeated flights along the same paths, at the same altitude, using the same camera settings. Each pass generated time-stamped footage intended to be directly comparable to previous surveys. When analysts reviewed the most recent flight, nothing immediately stood out. The structure appeared intact. The stones were where they were expected to be. Only later, during routine comparison with earlier recordings, did the difference emerge. A stone element near an opening, flat, heavy, carefully positioned, no longer aligned with fixed reference points in the surrounding masonry. The shift was subtle, but measurable. At first, the assumption was error. The footage was reloaded, metadata checked. Flight logs confirmed that the drone's path matched earlier surveys within narrow tolerances. Camera distortion was accounted for. Perspective was recalculated. The apparent shift remained. Analysts widened the comparison window. Footage from multiple dates was placed side by side. The stone's position changed gradually between surveys, but without any captured moment of movement. There was no single frame that showed it being displaced. Only the outcome was visible. Environmental data was consulted next. Weather records showed no storms or extreme winds during the relevant period. Rainfall had been moderate. Temperature fluctuations were within seasonal norms. No seismic activity had been recorded. Nothing obvious explained the shift. Attention turned to human factors. Was there any record of maintenance, restoration, or unauthorized access? Site logs showed none. The area was monitored. No equipment, footprints, or disturbances appeared in the imagery. The stone's surroundings were undisturbed. The ground beneath it unchanged. The finding was quietly unsettling. The footage did not suggest manipulation, but it did not allow dismissal either. Each check reduced the space for error without offering an alternative cause. The anomaly was not announced. It was documented, flagged, and set aside for further review. The language used was careful, provisional, but the underlying issue remained. The data showed change where change was not expected. The footage did not show interference, but it did show change. When the footage was examined frame by frame, the first anomaly became unavoidable. The stone had not simply shifted in perspective, it had rotated. The change was subtle but measurable. Reference points along its edges no longer aligned with adjacent stones in the same way. The angle was different, not dramatically, but decisively enough to exceed the margin of camera error. Rotation implies force applied unevenly, yet no such force was visible or recorded. The second anomaly lay in the surrounding material. If a heavy stone moves, whether pushed, pulled, or dislodged, its environment usually bears witness. Soil is disturbed. Small fragments scatter. Dust accumulates along new pressure points, areas where weight concentrates. In this case, none of those signs were present. The debris around the stone remained undisturbed across multiple surveys. The ground beneath it showed no compression or collapse. The stone appeared to have changed position without interacting mechanically with its surroundings. The stone had adjusted, quietly, incompletely, and without leaving a trace of how. A third anomaly concerned optical illusion. Analysts tested whether lighting, shadow length, or camera angle could create the appearance of movement. The drone flights had been conducted at consistent altitudes and orientations. Sun angle varied slightly between seasons, but not enough to account for the observed shift. Fixed. Markers elsewhere in the structure remained unchanged across all frames, reinforcing that the camera geometry was stable. The same reference stones, the same distances, the same proportions. The illusion explanation weakened with each control applied. The fourth anomaly involved scale. Minor settling is known to occur in ancient structures, particularly where soil compacts over time. Settling refers to the gradual sinking or compression of ground beneath weight. But the degree of movement observed here exceeded what gradual subsidence typically produces in such contexts. Settling tends to lower stones vertically, not rotate them laterally. Moreover, subsidence usually leaves irregular gaps or cracks, as weight redistributes unevenly, none of which appeared here. Together, these anomalies formed a pattern that resisted reduction. Each explanation addressed one aspect, but failed to account for the whole. Mechanical force explained rotation, but not the lack of disturbance. Optical. Distortion explained perception, but not measurement. Environmental settling explained slow change, but not direction. What made the analysis more difficult was restraint. No claim was made that the stone moved on its own. The language remained technical, cautious, deliberately narrow. And yet, the footage continued to show the same discrepancy, unchanged by interpretation. The anomaly did not announce itself as extraordinary. It simply persisted, immune to familiar categories. The stone had not leapt, fallen, or collapsed. It had adjusted without leaving evidence of how. Each explanation accounted for part of the image, but not the movement. As investigators broadened the scope of their checks, the anomaly refused to remain isolated. What first appeared as a single irregularity began to connect with other inconsistencies that deepened the uncertainty rather than resolving it. The first of these involved comparison beyond the site itself. Similar drone monitoring programs at other Irish stone structures were reviewed not because movement was expected, but to establish baseline behavior. In a small number of cases, analysts noted minor positional discrepancies in heavy stone elements that could not be immediately attributed to weathering or subsidence. None were as pronounced as the original case, and none showed clear motion. Still, the presence of comparable irregularities elsewhere weakened the assumption that this was an entirely singular event. A second anomaly emerged from environmental data. Detailed weather records were overlaid with the monitoring timeline. Wind speeds remained well below thresholds, the minimum force levels needed to cause effect, known to affect large stone elements. Rainfall was steady but unremarkable, insufficient to undermine foundations or trigger soil slippage. Temperature fluctuations followed seasonal norms, without rapid freeze-thaw cycles that might stress stone placement. Each environmental factor, examined individually, failed to reach explanatory sufficiency. Environmental causes weakened. Biological causes faded. Structural explanations narrowed. Each eliminated option reduced the list of ordinary causes without offering a replacement. The third anomaly involved biological activity. Large animals are sometimes responsible for subtle structural disturbance, particularly in rural settings. Wildlife surveys and site inspections, however, revealed no evidence of burrowing, trampling, or repeated contact near the stone. No paths formed, no marks appeared. Even vegetation around the base remained undisturbed, suggesting prolonged stability rather than intermittent interference. The fourth anomaly was structural. Engineers reviewed the stone's placement in detail, searching for hinge-like features, pivot points, or construction methods that might allow gradual movement under pressure. None were identified. The stone was not designed to open or swing. Its weight distribution favored stasis, not motion. Any rotation would require sustained force or deliberate manipulation. What made these findings unsettling was not their individual weight, but their convergence. Environmental causes weakened. Biological causes faded. Structural explanations narrowed. Each eliminated option reduced the list without offering a replacement. The investigative language remained careful. Terms like unresolved, anomalous, and under review replaced earlier assumptions. No extraordinary explanation was proposed, but neither could the ordinary ones close the case. The anomaly did not grow more dramatic with scrutiny. It became quieter, narrower, and harder to dismiss. As familiar causes were removed, what remained was not an answer, but a gap. When independent checks remove causes, the question does not disappear. The footage is reviewed in a small monitoring office, far from the site itself. Outside, traffic moves as usual. Inside, the room is dim, lit by a pair of monitors and the soft glow of a workstation running video analysis software. The atmosphere is procedural, unremarkable. This is not a moment staged for discovery. Two analysts sit side by side, scrolling through synchronized timelines. One points to the screen, then withdraws their hand without speaking. The stone's edge no longer lines up with a reference mark fixed in the masonry behind it. The difference is slight, but once seen, it cannot be unseen. They replay the footage again, slower this time. Frame by frame, no motion appears. The stone does not shift, tilt, or slide. It simply occupies a different position than it did before. The timestamps confirm the sequence. The metadata confirms the flight path. Everything checks out. A third colleague joins them. The footage is replayed without commentary. Silence settles over the room. Not out of disbelief, but caution. No one suggests an explanation. No one reaches for conclusions. The concern is not what it means, but how it will be received. They begin. Cross-checking logs. Maintenance records show no intervention. Access permissions reveal no unscheduled visits. Weather overlays are reviewed again, more out of habit than hope. Each step narrows the margin for error, without filling the space it leaves behind. There is hesitation before the next decision. Flagging the footage formally invites scrutiny. Ignoring it feels irresponsible. In the end, they choose a middle path. The clip is marked for further review, labeled Unresolved Movement. No commentary is attached. The room returns to its routine rhythm. Other files are opened, other sites reviewed, but the anomaly remains on the screen a moment longer than necessary, as if waiting for language that has not yet been agreed upon. The screen showed movement where none was expected. By the time the anomaly reached this stage of review, it could no longer be treated as a simple technical irregularity. The original assumption that a conventional cause would eventually surface began to erode under repetition. Each verification step strengthened the integrity of the data, while weakening the explanations designed to contain it. Standard mechanical causes had been exhausted. There was no evidence of human contact, intentional or accidental, no record of maintenance, no trace of tampering. Environmental explanations, once considered the most likely, had been narrowed to the point of implausibility. Wind, rain, temperature variation, and ground settling all fell below thresholds known to produce such effects, especially without visible disturbance. What remained was not an alternative explanation, but a reliance on exception. To dismiss the observation now required assuming that multiple independent safeguards had failed in the same direction, that metadata was misleading, that visual reference points were deceptive, and that structural analysis overlooked a hidden mechanism. Each assumption was possible. Together, they formed an increasingly fragile defense. This marked a shift in classification. The event was no longer treated as an error waiting to be corrected, but as an unresolved observation. The distinction matters. Errors disappear with scrutiny. Observations persist. The limits of current models became clearer. Conservation science explains how stone structures degrade, not how they subtly reconfigure, change in arrangement or position. Archaeology accounts for construction and collapse, not motion without trace. The frameworks in place were never designed to address this category of event, because such events were not expected to occur. This did not mean abandoning established knowledge. The site remained ancient. The stones remained heavy. The laws of physics remained unchanged. But the confidence that those laws had been fully accounted for in this context no longer held. From here on, certainty did not disappear, but it could no longer stand alone. With the observation now formally unresolved, analysts began to outline possible explanations, carefully ordered by how closely they adhered to established understanding. These hypotheses were not conclusions, they were frameworks, ways to test the limits of what was already known without exceeding the evidence. Hypothesis 1. Conservative. The most restrained explanation proposes that the apparent movement is the result of subtle structural settling misread at scale. According to this view, the stone may have shifted incrementally over time due to microscopic soil compression or long-term material fatigue. The weakening of stone over time from accumulated stress. Changes too small to notice in isolation, but visible when compared across months or years of high-resolution imagery. Analysts who favor this hypothesis point to the limits of measurement precision. Even small calibration differences can amplify perceived change. The difficulty is directionality. Settling usually produces vertical displacement, not lateral rotation, and typically leaves visible signs of stress that remain absent here. Hypothesis 2, disturbing. A second tier considers rare environmental interactions not yet fully modeled. This includes the possibility of slow, cumulative forces, thermal expansion cycles, where stone expands and contracts with temperature changes, moisture variation within stone, or internal stress redistribution that might allow heavy elements to adjust without obvious disruption. Engineers acknowledge that ancient structures sometimes behave in ways modern models struggle to predict, particularly when built without mortar. The discomfort here lies in rarity. These processes, if responsible, should be observable elsewhere with greater frequency. Their near absence raises questions about why this case would be exceptional. Hypothesis 3, vertiginous. The most unsettling interpretation does not propose a mechanism at all, but a gap in understanding. It suggests that current models of structural permanence may be incomplete when applied to certain ancient stone systems. This does not invoke intention, folklore, or agency. It acknowledges that centuries-old constructions may respond to time, environment, and internal forces in ways not yet fully described by conservation science. Analysts who entertain this possibility emphasize restraint. The lack of comparable documentation is not proof, but neither is it reassurance. Each hypothesis offers partial relief. Each explains how movement might occur. None explains why it would occur here, under these conditions, without leaving clearer evidence. Each hypothesis explains how, but not why. Stone structures are treated as anchors in time. They are the fixed points against which change is measured, unchanging witnesses to centuries of weather, erosion, and human absence. When they are monitored, it is usually to confirm that nothing has happened, that stability has held. In this case, the tools designed to verify permanence recorded something else. Not an event, not a cause, but a discrepancy, a difference between one moment and the next that could be measured, revisited, and confirmed, yet never observed in motion. The data did not dramatize the change. It documented it quietly. This does not overturn archaeology or conservation science. It expands the space where certainty thins, where observation outpaces explanation and classification lags behind evidence. Drone footage captures only what appears within its frame. It cannot explain what happens between flights. It records outcomes, not processes. In that gap, assumptions take over, until they are challenged by the next comparison. The stone still stands. The site remains intact. Visitors see nothing unusual, but the record now contains an unresolved mark, something that resists closure without demanding belief. Some changes are dramatic and visible. Others leave no trace except in data, and once recorded, they remain.